The Blood Mage, Chapter 1, Second Draft. At the college fortress of Horan's Gate on Ardain, on the 4th day of the 6th season, which is akin to spring, of the year 742 ER, mid-afternoon. Keth's blood shield thinned for a split second across the left of the rippling sphere as he lunged, pulling a gallon of blood from one of the barrels to cover for Arian's overreaching attack against the Master. A torrent of blood crashed towards Arian, some from the barrels and buckets spread throughout the arena, some appearing in thin air in the center or around Arian, as though drawn from an unseen corpse flailing above her. The wave crashed against the wall surrounding Arian, saving her from drowning in the ichor. The blood of both splashed and crashed down, soaking the sand arena in repugnant red blood. A burning pain ripped along the flesh of Keth's left forearm, resettling his shield. He turned the nasty gash into as clean of a scar as he could, as his opponent, the Grand Blood Mage Alpheus, called out, "Sloppy work, Keth. If I had wanted to, you would now be dead." Arian pressed forward during the words, taking advantage of the momentary lapse in the Master's constant stream of spells, growling, "So what? He was supposed to let me die instead?" and absorbed as much blood from the barrels as she could to charge the Master. But the Master did not waver. Arian fell to her knees as the blood in her body lurched to obey his will. Keth poured the blood he had been using back into the buckets, accepting the fight was over. The Master looked between the two apprentices before finally sighing and shaking his head. Quietly, an even sloppier mistake, Arian. One that most certainly would have cost you in the field. You knew that your ally was unable to support you in that second attack, and even that he was in need of support himself. And instead of guarding his life, you put a full frontal attack on, what? The hopes I'd be distracted? The poor girl looked completely crestfallen, looking at her feet before finally mumbling, "You were talking. I thought you wouldn't be able to cast." She sighed, knowing she had made a stupid mistake. "You've seen me cast non-verbally," the Master said flatly as he looked down at her for a moment before softening. "A bad assumption isn't the end of the world. That's why you're here at the college, to make the mistakes where the price isn't your life. But out there, the price is your life. That's why I have to be hard on you. You're ambitious, but you're reckless. If you can master your impulses, you have serious potential. But not before that." Arian gave an acceptant nod. As Keth trotted over, the Master critiqued again. "And as for you, Keth, do you know why the pair of you failed?" "I honestly don't know, Master. I felt like we were doing everything as well as we could have." The Master stared at him flatly as well. "You know, I can feel your pulse quicken when you lie. So why bother trying?" The boy hesitated, then admitted, "I felt like you were throwing everything at only me." He looked down and away from Arian as he finished. "I felt like if Arian had helped me a little more, or pushed harder, we could have done better." Arian went red and went to speak, but the Master curtly raised his hand to silence her, before turning to her and speaking. After our last lesson, Arian, I instructed you to watch more closely for openings, and take advantage of them rather than keep a constant onslaught. It works to stop you from running yourself ragged too early in a fight. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't still create your own openings, or at the very least have used some of your energy to help your friend. Look at how exhausted he is, and thereby his magic supply, versus how close to refreshed you are. When fighting together, you must keep a balance. If I attack harder, you must defend harder. Your defense must be equal to your opponent's attacks at all times. Patience in waiting for an opportunity is only applicable to your attack. He looked to her for understanding, but instead she turned away to storm out of the room, hurt in her eyes. So everything's my fault then. But the master stood and, still speaking calmly, responded, "That is not what I said. When you waited for the right moment and capitalized, you chose the perfect moment. I would have been unable to respond, and the match would have still been yours." He turned back to Keth. Then, as Arian turned back, almost trembling, Keth's mistake was in this case the greater of the two. Alpheus looked between the two apprentices as he spoke, but they didn't understand. "In attacking you, I left many openings for Arian to take advantage of. With each of the strikes she gave, she pushed me further and further off balance." The master began to contemplatively pace. "And if I had slowed for my attacks on you to rebalance, I would have lost what little advantage I had. The longer the fight went, the greater your advantage became, until eventually I overstepped and Arian put her full attack at me all at once." The master looked intently at Keth then. "I was off balance. No chance of escape from the attack. The match was over. And what did you choose to do?" The young man looked completely puzzled as he glanced down and thought. For the split second I could see that her shield was down and she was throwing everything into an attack, so I threw a shield up to protect her from the counter-strike. You saw how much I was putting into the attack, so you knew I was unarmored. You saw Arian put enough force into her attack to break through any last-second shield, correct? But then, instead of winning the fight by joining on the offense, you resorted to defense." The master shook his head somberly. "Your lack of aggression would have cost Arian. When you are in the field, in the flurry of combat, you cannot hesitate to capitalize on your allies' instincts, strengths, and your enemy's weaknesses. While also not failing for a baited attack. While also not falling for a baited attack. It's not easy, which is why we train." The master eyed the two in contemplation. Then finally he said, "Tomorrow I'm going to duel each of you in turn, and I want you two to study each other. Keth, you need Arian's fire, and Arian, you need Keth's steadiness." The two young mages looked at each other confused, but nodded, curious. The master looked up at the great clock overlooking the arena. "I think we've given Salian long enough to understand the next method you are going to learn. Go grab her. She's at the third library on Athan Island. You have 2 hours. Take the Monosco Tunnel to get there. I want you to see an Aethmot. And they're migrating this time of year. Then meet me at the Bridge Arena. That should please her." He spoke rapidly in excitement with a conspiratorial look in his eye as he gave the peculiar instructions. The two apprentices turned to take the Monosco Tunnel to go find the third apprentice. A few short minutes and a walk weaving through hallways and the other students of the college. After a few, they reached the underground tunnel. In front of the tunnel entrance were a collection of columns, each of a different material representing the different major forms of magic researched at the college. Blood was not represented. Sitting cross-legged atop a slightly light blue see-through crystal column was one of the gate guard. Keth and Arwen froze when they saw her, her light gray, almost white robes flowing downward along the column. They immediately turned to walk away, pretending they hadn't meant to come this way, but then their mind went blank and they were ensnared. They blinked their eyes back open, and they were kneeling before the gate guard, who was staring down imperiously, but somehow warmly, from her place on the column. "Why have you come here?" Her luscious lips did not move, the voice embedding it directly into their minds, as though it was a thought they themselves had had. Aruin went to speak, but then her jaw slowly grinded back shut as the gate guard's eyes flashed. Once more in her mind, "Speak in your mind." To speak aloud to a mind mage is a cruel insult, especially within her college of devotion. Keth eventually thought to her, his inner voice echoing into Aruin's mind as well. "Grand Blood Mage Alfreus told us to take the Monosco Tunnel to Aethan Island so we could see an Aethmote. His inner voice was strange, not like his voice, but neither like his thoughts. More true and primal than either. An almost horrifying, echoing, tinkling laughter broke into their minds. You don't need to focus so hard to speak to minds. The increased thought makes your mind push against the truth of your thoughts." After a short moment, her thoughts turned to Aruin. "And what do you hope to find there?" Aruin's thoughts were shaky, almost like they were spasming in her mind. "To find Salian in the third library. Grand Blood Mage Alfreus wants us to grab her so he can duel her on the blood bridge, on the bridge arena with our help." She flinched with each word. Aruin, flinched with each word. "So, Alfreus didn't teach you to not bother lying to mind mages then. We can read lies, even better than blood mages can. And once we read them, we can force you to speak the truth." In their minds there was a sighing sound as they regained control of their bodies. "You are the two I was sent to watch for. Tell Alfreus to be quick. Few have been down here, and none that would idly walk past a gate guard and her business, but the Archmage is feeling erratic, and he likes to pace down here when he needs to calm his nerves and thoughts. Go." The two apprentices rose shakily to their feet and bolted from the room, half running, half pretending to be calm. They entered the tunnel. It was a glass tube that stretched underwater from the eastern shore through several islands to the northern shore on the other side of the strait of water. Apprentices weren't allowed down here, except on special request from a master. They practically ran through it, ignoring massive creatures hidden in the shadowy depths. Finally, they slowed down. What on Adar just happened? They both froze. Aruin had been the one trying to speak, but it had been a thought sent instead. "Ah, there you two are." The voice in their head was unexpected, but somehow familiar. "I see you've found the first secret of the tunnel. All speech is in the mind." The two remained frozen, perfectly still. "Oh. I suppose having just met a gate guard of the mind was the wrong thing to have you do immediately before entering the tunnel. I apologize. I'm further down the tunnel. Meet me and I'll explain everything and what's going on." And so they followed after the thought down further into the nerve-wracking tunnel. A few hour-long minutes later, they found an underground room within the tunnel. Their master sat cross-legged on a pillow, up on a raised section of the room up a few steps. "Sorry about the gate guard, my apprentices, but what I'm about to tell you is of the utmost secrecy. The sort of thing that would warrant me asking for her help without explaining what was going on. What I was going to tell you." The two just stared at him as he continued. "It's to do with why there are so few blood mages left." He paused, as though finally coming to a decision. "What do you know of the Mageborn?"